Yo, episode 2 of Study Hall. I'm thrilled you guys are deciding to watch, listen along, however you may be consuming this. But this is a great episode. For this week, I sat down and talked with Dr. Joyce Spurgeon. Joyce has been a friend of mine for, over the years, but really in the last couple of years, we've really kind of strengthened that bond. She's a psychiatrist that practices here in Southern Indiana and across the Louisville metro area. Absolutely fantastic individual who I thought would be a great conversation to sit down and talk about mental health and specifically mental health challenges that creatives deal with. I know of being an artist and having a decent community within the space that this can be something that I believe falls to the wayside for a lot of folks. Whether if it's they're not as privy and is open to understanding some of the challenges that they may face, or even if they can recognize it, but they don't quite know where to go to get help to learn coping mechanisms and just really live a healthier lifestyle. And so I asked Joyce to come on and for us to discuss this. And leading up to the episode, we had kind of chatted a little bit about how we wanted to go about recording this. And I obviously could have sat and spewed a bunch of questions to her and just had her spew out a couple answers. But the more that we stewed on that, it didn't feel as authentic as it could be. And so I actually come to her in this episode and sit down as though I'm having a therapy session. I actually do have a therapy session with her, and we just happen to record it. So I come with, we talk about it in the episode, but some of my own problems, some of my own questions, my own demons that I'm wrestling with, and we talk through them. And she provides, I think, some amazing insights, some tidbits that even for myself of trying to sit here and entertain you all with recording this episode, I was able to take away and say, shit, man, that's impactful. So I really hope that you all enjoy this. Can't recommend and encourage you all enough that whether maybe this is your first time being exposed to like what a therapy session might be, or maybe it's not, but it changes your view a little bit and wanted to get some help, go find somebody to talk to. It's one of the better things I've ever done in my life, of having a therapist, having somebody that just, it's removed from my own bullshit in my life and can provide educated feedback to me. So hopefully this shines a positive light for you all on what therapy can do and can be helpful. And so, yeah, let's jump into episode 2 with Dr. Joyce Spurgeon. Thanks. This is a weird one for me. Again, we talked about it the other night, but how do we start this off? We just get into it?
Yeah. And then you're going to edit around whatever you want to edit around, right?
Yeah, I'll edit around whatever I want. Or maybe I don't edit around anything. We'll see. Obviously, like I was saying, thank you so much for doing this morning. Dr. Joyce Spurgeon, welcome to Study Hall, episode 2. I'm pumped on this. It's weird me calling you Dr. Joyce Spurgeon. Is that?
I mean, that's weird for me too. I'll be honest. Most days don't think of myself as a doctor. I mean, I know I am, but yes, that's weird.
When you have, I mean, is that typically like professionally, you're like, it's doctor, like that's how people refer
Yes.
to you, or it's just Joyce? Okay.
No, only because it's important professionally that they understand I'm not their friend in that case.
Wait, you're not?
I mean, I love some of my patients, but no, I'm not. It's important. I'm not their friend. I'm something else in their life.
I know I was super interested to have you on to talk with you. Obviously you and I know each other. We have a relationship, right?
Right.
But I think for me, again, what I'm always interested in, and coming from a selfish spot of like being a creative person, really this like next stage of my life of trying to figure out of like these weird feelings of uncertainties of career paths, dealing with parenthood, but everything always encompasses creativity for me. And so I was really curious to just kind of have you on and pick your brain a little bit on this stuff. But more importantly, you and I kind of thought this would be interesting to like actually just do a session. Like I'm coming to you to come talk to you about problems. Is that even you refer to it as problems, or is that even not the appropriate term?
I mean, I think problems is fine. I think so. Some people come to see me for problems.
Right.
Some people come to see me because they're just trying to find their way in life. in whatever way that looks. And I think that's probably an easier way for people to term it, because a lot of it's not problems, because there's that negative connotation with that. It really is, I like to, I, nobody gets to me without having some kind of issue, but some of their issues are really, they get stuck in their own thoughts and trying to figure out, what do those thoughts mean, and where do I want to go with them?
Well, I mean, right off the bat, like for me, I have this crippling anxiety. Even seems like it's like too harsh for a word to say, but of not being satisfied anymore with like what I'm doing professionally, and how that then trickles down to affect like everything else in my life right now.
Right. Well, you think about that. What you do professionally is where you spend a ton of your time,
Right.
right? I mean, most people, even creative people, have to have so many hours a day to create or to do, right? Or,
Absolutely.
or if you're a creative person having to work a different job, you have to have so many hours to do that job.
Yeah.
And so, your mind tends to stay where your time is spent.
Yeah.
And so if you're unhappy in that, it absolutely has a ripple effect to everything else. I
Well,
mean,
I have a really difficult time. So you know who Rick Rubin is?
I do not.
Okay, music producer, super famous. He's literally crossed every genre you could ever imagine. Looks like
So you
uh,
basically just said I'm completely out of touch with the world. Thanks, Nick.
you
Appreciate
said that. I did not
it.
say that. You
Thank
said
you.
that.
I'm good with
Yeah, very wise guy. But like Rick has talked about this whole like separation of that for creative people, that sometimes like just having a job is perfectly fine. Like having a means to afford a lifestyle and to take care of yourself, everybody needs to do. But like that doesn't have to take away from this whole idea of finding like your purpose in life. And when you're not working your job, right, of like still putting in the time and energy to do that. I it resonates with me when I hear him say that, but I still have such a difficult time. And again, maybe it's the, me being a little egotistical, but like of that, I like it. I hate the fact that like what my 9 to 5 or my career's turned into is like so non-creative. It's like more from this like analytics engineering perspective, like really high critical thinking, which is not the way like I want to be leaving my mark, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I can't get around that. Like I can't separate the two. It feels like I have to find a way to be able to make a living and afford a lifestyle for myself, and obviously as like a dad now for my kid. But it has to be in something that's creative. Like I don't want to be doing this other stuff anymore.
Well, I think you are also in a position at this point that you can say, I can make some different choices.
How so? Like what
I
choices are those,
mean,
maybe?
my guess is financially you
Yeah.
can afford to make some different choices, because that opens up. I mean, hear me. I understand you probably can't make anything that you can make in tech doing something creative. I mean,
Right.
I'm not that far out of touch.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
However, you have some options to explore that some people won't ever have.
I mean, it's very true. It's 100% true. I also still I have like weird. It's all childhood. Again, trauma is like too harsh word I don't like to use, but of like finances stuff. Like, I mean, again, the tricklings of my family, but I was like always privy to like financial stuff as a kid from like my mom and and for D. And so I even now as an adult still internalize that, and it's always of like I can't not be making money because then I'm gonna fall behind the eight ball sort of thing. So like even I agree with you. You're right. Like I have a very nice cushion that I could take a ton of time off, but I can't get myself to that place. It's a very difficult thing for me to transition to that because of again the weird like financial insecurities that I have.
And again, I think that uh, as somebody who grew up without money, I understand that on a level that I can resonate with that.
Right.
But it is always important to realize what is truth and what is not. And the
Mm.
truth is you could do something else today if you wanted to.
Yeah, I could go get a job at Tractor Supply and just be fine with it.
and
Yeah.
and and not do what you're doing. But a job at Tractor Supply is not going to fill that need either.
No, it won't. But honestly, there's like a different itch that scratches of
Mhm.
I just want to go in. I have a task. You go do that task. You check that task off, and you're
And
like,
it's done.
yeah, I feel good. Not having a project that's lingering for months among like just thousands of people that nobody can make a decision. And just like you never feel like my current role is like I'm never feeling like I'm accomplishing anything, which is very tough for me.
Right.
So it just feels like wasted time that's heavily stressed. So I always joke it's like my Tractor Supply dream, yeah, or a hardware store, or some bullshit like that.
Well, I think, again, I think all of us wouldn't mind a 9 to 5 that you sort of just check in and check out. The
Yeah,
reality is the people who work at Tractor Supply or hardware, they carry their own stuff home with them. So
yeah,
once you get engaged, when you get engaged with the people and the job, suddenly you're carrying more stress with you. And maybe not the level that you are right now, but
yeah,
none of it comes without hooks.
yeah. I mean, that's fair with it. That's fair. I mean, grass is always greener, right?
Yes. And again, I think some for you, Nick, is how can you say this is just for now?
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things I learned in medical school, which was very hard for me, was I was not the smartest person in the room.
Mm,
And I could study and study and study, and I might get two more questions right on the test,
mm-hmm.
and I would still be average.
Yeah, yeah,
That was completely new to me.
yeah.
What I decided a little bit into, my first 3 or 4 months was I could not live my life because medical school is hard, but it's also 4 years of life. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to live my life miserable and studying all the time because I was going
Yeah.
to miss everything during that time. And I missed a lot of things, but I didn't miss everything. And and I just decided, those two questions I'm just going to miss, but I'm going to take back those 8 to 10 hours I would have studied to get them right
Mm-hmm.
because I need some life. And so it really taught me some um, ability to shut off, that when work is done, when I shut my computer or walk out of my office in the evening, I can't say I never worry about people because I'm human.
Right.
And I do care for my patients.
Yeah. Your
But,
friends.
yes, in general, smart aleck. In general, I'm able to go home and say, I did the best I could today with what I
Mm-hmm.
had.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to shut that off till tomorrow so
Mm-hmm.
that my family gets what they need and
Yeah.
I get what I need from, all the other people in my life.
Yeah.
And that I do that well sometimes. I don't do that well other times, but I think that is for anybody, but particularly for creatives, you have to be able to shut off at the end of the day if you do have to do that 9 to 5 job
Mm-hmm.
so that you can then open the other part of your mind to the part that fills your soul.
Yeah, and I think I'm pretty disciplined in that. I mean, it's like I can be regimented for, work is work and you're spending that time. As soon as that's done, and as soon as that's done, that is done, like that's put away.
Right.
And now of like making sure I'm like spending quality time with like Joe and with Lex and doing all that stuff. But it's like soon as she's down, Lex always goes to bed earlier than I do. And I'm right back in the studio. Like it is literally like like because I know it's one of those things that if I'm not exercising that muscle in my brain creatively and being disciplined and working on stuff, like it just falls at the wayside. But I can be pretty good about being regimented in that. I'm not going to lie that like I think about doing art 24/7. I think about creating projects, business models, doing stuff like this, like the podcast. Like my brain is always running a million miles an hour on this stuff. But the work side, I can push to the side. Like I said, because it's such a large chunk of my time, I'm just so unsatisfied with the way that I'm spending my life. And it also like I can't help for the fact of I mean with my with D getting sick, my dad, and like how much that was just like I mean it's whatever, it's a shitty situation, but having conversations with him in those last couple months and weeks and like him like vocalizing and being such a proponent of I didn't do enough of the things I should have done in my life. Like that sits with me a lot of I know I have to have a job and support myself and my family. I don't know. It weighs. It definitely weighs of being, like I just don't want to be doing this anymore. And I can't quite figure out the mechanism to get out of it. Or at least in my head, I start to like stew on that a little bit too much. And then that seeps into anxiety and like, bouts of stress and all that stuff. So I don't know. But
Well, it's interesting because I think a lot of at least the higher end techie people that I see,
mhm.
um, they they don't plan on working a long time. So
No.
it's like the time you work crazy hours and crazy stress and crazy all the things
Hmm.
and get compensated pretty well for it.
Hmm.
But then there's a point where they're like, no one can do that long term. Or if
No.
they do, you almost become like a robot.
Yeah, I mean, all of my like a large chunk of all my good like adult friends I've met since like working in what I do in my field, and every single one of them, it's the same spiel. They hate it. You feel like it's just you're just a cog in the system sort of thing. Like there's nothing
Mhm.
creative about it. I think the ones that stay longer than others are it becomes I have to afford the lifestyle that I've built for myself,
Right.
right? And whether if that's family, if that's living in some specific location that's like super expensive, but that becomes, I think, the hook of like keeping people a little bit longer. Because again, you're right. Like you're not going to go anyplace else and make the money that you're making, and it's hard to walk away from. Like it's hard to walk away when you're signing, a huge contract with one of these companies. Uh, and then, I mean, hell, then I'll get anxiety from time to time of thinking about that, of like, how do I minimize and like declutter my lifestyle that at some point when I can just wash my hands of all this, I'm not, you know, up against a wall, like trying to afford, house payment, car payments, like ridiculous, like monthly bills and this and that. So I don't know, it's a never ending cycle for me, I feel like.
Well, and I think that the other thing is they tie you into a certain idea that this is what you have to do. And again, for people you said, "Oh, I think the people who stay get tied in with money." I think they also get tied in that some of them don't have the creative urge or it has gotten buried in the process.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't build it and you don't put time into it, you can start thinking it's not important. And
Absolutely.
so they get caught in the drudgery of this is just what life is.
Yeah.
And again, I think Dee's passing taught us all that, you think you're going to retire and do all the things you wanted, and you don't always get that chance. And
Yeah.
so, if this is what you're given, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
and I would be interested to know, like, would there be a way to think differently about a tech job as far as could you do less hours? I mean, I don't know, I don't know that world, obviously, as I've demonstrated, but it never hurts to ask the question,
Right.
uh, do I have to keep doing this the same way? Now, if you've signed a contract and you've said you're going to do it, yeah, the answer to that is yes. But the
Yeah.
next time, if you've proven your worth, do you have some bargaining power to keep some of it on where your structured salary and then
Hmm.
leave more time for yourself? Because again, when we get in it, we get stuck thinking, well, this is the way it has to be done.
Right. I mean, 100% you can. I think that I mean, there's variables that come into it of seniority, right? So, like,
Right.
for even a two, like, I just had signed this new contract, and with the level that I'm at, and I was just talking with Lex about this other night. Like, I've never more have had to hear from like upper management that I've had to deal with in discussions, but literally driving home the point of like your seniority, your expertise, your level, da 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 da. So like that already creates a level of anxiety in me of like, and again, I'm not a people pleaser, but I like if somebody sticks their neck out for me and offers me a job sort of thing, like I want to make sure that like I'm living up to that. So there's a weird stress of like, what the hell does this mean? Like,
Right.
I know my skills. I can like I'm not cocky. I'm confident, but I'm very confident I can put me up against anybody. I'm going to knock them out of the park just from my energy and hustle of like trying to do a job.
Right.
But yeah, it's, I think you can work smarter, not harder. I mean, fuck it. I took like a day this week and I was like, I'm not touching anything from like my corporate job. I'm just working on like 3D artwork for today. And it was just kind
Mhm.
of like, I need to, replenish like my bucket sort of thing. And then
Mhm.
the next day you dip back in and you get done what you have to get done. But so yeah, you can definitely maneuver that so it's not as like grudging like 9 to 5 every single day sort of thing. But I also, again, you still struggle with like anxiety with that because it's the problem with like big business design in that way is there's so many people that get involved, it slows everything down. And when things are being slowed down so much, and again, you're making the compensation you're making, you start to internalize anxiety of like, well, I'm not doing enough. And then if I'm feeling I'm not doing enough, then like, or am I going to get fired now? And that is like across the board what I feel like people deal with in this.
Mhm. Well, I
But
think that any business that works in teams at this point is like people are struggling with that because you're
you think
depending
even smaller than bigger?
on, unless it's a well-run team and it's a small enough company that there's just one team.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, one of the local businesses is an engineer, makes motors. And
Hmm.
um, I hear them talking about, I can't do my stuff until I get this person's information.
Hmm.
So I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, I need this so I can move forward, but I can't make that cog go any quicker.
Right.
And so, how do you decrease that anxiety and just go, okay, well, today's a day that I just don't work as hard? I mean, because most of us who are professionals are driven to, I give my best each day in all things we do, right?
Right. Right.
And so, when you feel like, well, this is not my best, well, maybe we need to rewrite that in your brain as to whether that is your best because it's honestly using your time wisely. If
Yeah.
there's a cog slowing you down, well, then that's a day you have other things to do,
Yeah. Right.
and you just do that without, hear me, without the guilt and all the stuff that does the trickle effect of, you shut your brain off and say, just shut up.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
about my integrity as a worker. This is just, this is sort of not in my control. And for most of us, the not in my control sort of pushes all of our buttons and that just sort of angst us up.
Yeah, I mean it definitely does. I mean, I can become a control freak on some of that stuff as well. So it's tough.
No, that's shocking to me.
Dude, shut up. I but I will say of like work like I've earlier in my career I've worked on more smaller nimble teams. And I agree. I think you're right that like any collaborative effort you can, again, when things are not within your control, like that can create a little bit of anxiety and stress. But like for me, those smaller teams, just because there was less hurdles to jump through, it's like, okay, we
Mhm.
kind of, we all understand the landscape. We all understand what people are working on. Yes, I might need to deal with a copywriter or a project manager or this and that if, we're developing some product, but like, we all kind of have our respected roles and we can kind of move a little bit more nimble because we're smaller. But it's one of those things of like within big tech of, and again, you don't know it until you get into it, but
Mhm.
because it's such a bloated system. And the reality is too, is because there's so much ambiguity and like nobody really knows what anybody's working on. Everybody's also like cutthroat as shit. So it's like, you could be working on a project with somebody and I'm the biggest team player you'll get into. I'm the biggest cheerleader. Like I will lift anybody up and yeah, it's a great idea. Let's go for it. But you'll have someone else you're working with that's like, fuck that. Like that's my idea. I'm going to use that because I want
Mhm.
to take that and get promoted and this and that. And it's just this
So,
waterfall
so
of,
in med
yeah.
school, we called them the gunners. The gunners,
Yeah.
the,
Okay. Yeah.
they were
Yeah.
the people who wouldn't, if you couldn't figure something out, they wouldn't tell you. If
Right.
you lost your notes, they weren't going to give you theirs.
All
They
right.
were the ones who, I'm going to be top of the class because I want to be whatever kind of specialist I want to be.
Right.
And
Right.
for you.
Right.
Um,
You
and
call them
that's,
gunners. I would call them assholes, but that's good to
well, I
know. Yeah.
mean, gunners is probably more
That's
PC.
probably more appropriate. Whatever. Yeah.
Um, but I will say, when you were talking about groups, I was actually thinking, the for a group to be nimble, One, you have to have a group leader that trusts the people of the group. So when you're working with people that you know are competent and you know will do a good job, your group can be very nimble if everybody can sort of check their egos and say, hey, let's everybody do their part.
Yeah.
Where groups get in trouble is when people are trying to stomp somebody to get someplace else,
Yep.
and it messes up the whole dynamic of the group, and it makes the group process not work in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I also, and I've found it's a thing. I always talk to Lex about this. And I think I noticed this just again growing up in the household that I grew up with and growing up here in Indiana. But the verbal diarrhea of folks. Like I remember, I would always have, like Dee would always tell me this thing of just because you have a mouth doesn't mean you need to use it. I mean, you hear that as a kid, and you're like, the fuck are you talking about? But then obviously, like you become an adult, and you're like, that is the most Yoda thing anybody has ever told me. Move in silence. Like you don't need, but the working in these sort of organizations or any of that stuff, I think that's the thing that like it becomes exhausting of like just some of the verbal diarrhea that like these folks have of just whether if they're know-it-alls or loving to hear their own voice, and that becomes such a trigger for me because it's just a personality trait that I hate, and it's I run into it all the time, like all the time, everybody that I have to deal with for the most part. um so I don't know. I mean, whatever. At the end of the day, I need to find a pivot, right? Like it's just.
Well, I think that again, it's sort of like what you're looking for, you're going to find.
Hmm.
So when you think about, I'm unhappy, I don't really want to do this.
Hmm.
So you go to a meeting and you're like, oh my God, that person will not shut up.
Yeah.
And so you start sort of going, oh, here we go again. And again, you go down this rabbit hole as opposed to, I'm not going to give that person my emotional energy. I know them, I know what they're trying to do. And honestly, that's not who I want to be anyway.
Yeah.
Um, you know, it in the society we live in right now, it is hard to be the person who just goes and does the right thing every day.
Hmm.
And none of us do the right thing every day, but like goes and
Well,
tries
speak
to
for
do the
yourself.
right thing. Okay, except for you.
Yeah.
But like most of us try to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And if you're not self-promoting and you're not saying, "Oh, look at me, look what I did,"
Hmm.
it's you're sort of an oddity.
Hmm.
However, the peace that comes inside, you will get nowhere else in your life.
What do you mean by that?
That just knowing, okay, I'm doing what I think is right. Now again,
Mm.
it's not
Mm.
always the right thing, but anything I put my name on, I know I've done my best work for, or so the concepts of integrity and who you want to be to the world are so important to inner peace, because a lot of people can't find inner peace and inner contentment because they're so busy running this rat race. They have no idea what's inside. And
Mm.
when they do know what's inside, they're so busy telling everybody else what they think they want to hear that there's a disconnect between the two.
How do you? I wrestle with that a lot of times where I might want to operate and function in a way that I feel like my inner peace, right? Like my inner version of myself. But obviously, like that doesn't work within my world sometimes. Like I have to be more aggressive or a little bit more even upbeat when I don't feel like being like. How do you recommend for people deal like grappling with that, where it's the yin and the yang between the 2?
Well, I think it's if you tell yourself, look, some of this is about playing the game,
Hmm.
and you understand it's a game.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't mean to trivialize it because some of this is hard stuff for people,
Yeah.
but there are some things you have to do at work that frankly you don't want to do. Whatever, they seem
Yeah.
stupid, but you just do it because you got to jump through the hoop.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many people who think, well, I don't ever want to have to jump through those hoops. Well, the world doesn't work that way.
Hmm.
There are certain hoops we have to jump through. I mean, as long as they're not illegal or something completely opposed to your moral compass,
Right.
it really is, okay, this is just a hoop. I'm not going to give it a lot of emotional energy. I'm just going to jump through it and move on. I can think it's stupid. I can think it's whatever. But the more I stay stuck in thinking, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that I just spent all this time on that, I'm just wasting all that emotional energy. And that energy can be used so much better in other places.
All right. I think that's, I mean, it's a good way to look at it. I wanted to ask you just for your thought on this. And you kind of touched about this a second ago. So this whole idea of, forgot how you phrase it, but basically of like publicizing yourself, like putting yourself out there of like, look at me sort of thing, right?
Hmm.
This is for artists and creative people now these days. And social media is the means of like, for the most part free, but of marketing and advertisement of like who you are and for your skills.
Hmm.
I obviously partake in this. I mean, hell, doing this podcast is somewhat of that, of like building a
Yeah.
community around that stuff. But there is, again, of going back to that internal dialogue, like there's a part that just again, it sounds like I know this is not a big picture problem sort of thing, but of the grappling, because I don't overly enjoy the whole like, hey, look at me sort of thing. Like I want all eyeballs on this, but it is the only means out there. Again, if you're going to market yourself, you have to do that. So how, like, for me coming to you and saying like, I'm having a hard times, with this, is there any, like, what would you say to me?
So I think the hardest thing in the world that all of us, all human beings grapple with
Yeah.
is is the idea that at the end of the day, we are just ourselves. Like no matter how much we love our kids or our husband or our wife or whoever, like
Mm-hmm.
there's a certain amount of alone or
Mm-hmm.
foundational things that inside of you have to be very okay with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think artists probably, creative people probably have, because they are looking at how do people respond to what I'm putting out there. And again, art to me is you're putting your heart in front of me and I'm looking at it. Because that's to me where creativity comes from. Heart's not the right word, but heart,
No,
soul, whatever
yeah,
you want to call it.
I feel you.
And so, but the world we live in, people don't really stop and think, oh, this is somebody's heart and soul they're putting in front. They're just looking at a graphic going, well, that's stupid.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And they don't think about the personalized of the person behind it. I think social media has done a lot of things to our world, but one of the things that really has done is made us not be thinking so much about, hey, there's a person behind everything that's on there.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, the internet's just dehumanized a lot of that. So I mean, it's the
absolutely.
whole reason you have trolls. It's the whole reason you have
Mhm.
like online bullying. It's yeah, for sure.
And all the anonymous crap. I mean, to me, if you're
Mm-hmm.
not willing to sign your name, you should not be saying it. And I feel that on evaluations, all
Right.
the things. If I'm not
Mm-hmm.
willing to stand behind it, I probably shouldn't be saying it. So I think that that's probably if I were going to say anything, that I would say you have to build up that foundation of whether people like it or whether people don't like it. I have to be okay because I know my intent, I know my dream, I know whatever it is that's behind the creative process you're doing, I know that it is good and meant, you know, in the best possible way. Because
Yeah.
again, there's trolls who are going to say awful things. There's people who are going to love it. There's people who are going to love you or love me from all of this. And there's people who are going to hate us both, or probably me, not you.
Oh
Um,
no, there will be plenty that hate me. Don't.
but you know what I mean? Like, so you have to be okay internally so
Mm-hmm.
that whatever happens with it, you can say, okay, I can try to listen to the things I need to listen to constructively about
Mm-hmm.
things. And then I have to say, this is not personal because they don't know me.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah. I
that
mean,
it's that me that's the sacred place.
yeah. I mean, honestly, the negativity that comes with it sometimes, and like that doesn't rub me the wrong way. Like I'm fine. Like I've very much of a mindset of like art just elicits a response, and not to get dumb heady about this stuff, but I mean, For somebody
Mhm.
that's like been a creative since a kid, went to art school, put my parents in debt, all of that sort of stuff. And I'm still now, even though again, my job is meh, but I still like, I'm a creative person at heart. Like it is 100% to your point. It's a subjective medium. And so of like being around good and bad, which subjective is my opinion on it. Like
Mhm.
even the bad, it still elicits a response where I'm just like, this is a piece of shit, or whatever. But I'm very fine with that. I think the anxiety that sometimes comes from me is of a I don't look at myself as a loud, gregarious sort of person. But the whole idea of like having to put yourself out there so much to build community, build an audience, get eyeballs kind of on your work. That's the part I have a hard time kind of wrestling with. And then there's the other side of it that like, is it all for nothing? And now again, it was like different before technology really got to this place where like, if you were creative, again, you might die and never, no one's ever seen your work, but that's also to be expected because there's a limited availability for exposure on that stuff. Now I can post something on Instagram and I can get 100,000 views on something within a week. Like the the means is there, the mechanism for exposure is there, but I could be doing all this and my time could come and it's still for nothing. Like, it's just, it's a weird thing of thinking like, oh, that's such a large body of people that are just like, nah, he didn't cut it. And for a creative person and the insecurities that come with that, like that is crippling to think about. Like, I'm never going to make a piece of art or a body of work that has any lasting effect or influence on people. Like, ugh.
Right. But as a creative person, if you don't try, so if you don't honor
For
that
sure.
part of you that is foundationally who you are,
Hmm.
you're crippled in a completely different way.
Oh, I'm not myself. I know I'm not
Right.
myself. I mean,
So
I always tell Lex, I go, it's the only way I can ever think to describe the that internal feeling that I have of like, I need to go make something. It's for someone that like enjoys working out, where like, if you
mhm,
haven't worked out for a couple of days, you start to just feel like a shell of yourself and really blah, or whatever it is in your life. That's like that is for me of that, that never turns off in my brain. And until I'm able to make something, and I've done a lot of work on myself of like, what is perfection? Like, that was a big thing that in my 20s I had a difficult time with. But now I'm at a spot where I can be like, you know what? Like, my level of energy, I'm done putting it into this. Like, I'm
mhm.
at peace with this. Uh, but I still have to, it's like on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. And like, yeah, that's my cycle.
Well, but what if, you start saying that actually success. So I get success as the mark of somebody saying, "Oh yeah," or it taking hold. But what if your mark of success is changed to be having the courage to do it in the first place?
I mean,
I
that's
mean,
pretty profound.
again, it's so one of the things. Again, I'm just telling you things I learned when I was a student. But as a resident,
Yeah.
we worked on inpatient psych units and
Hmm.
in the city, and so you'd get. I mean, you're not supposed to call them frequent flyers, but you discharge somebody on Friday and they'd be back on Tuesday. You could write their intake before you even saw them because you
Right.
knew.
Right.
Um, and so if I measured success on did I make this person better,
Hmm.
um, it could get to be a very depressing rotation. So I had to change what was success. So sometimes success was we kept them out of the hospital for a week.
Hmm.
Sometimes it was longer than that. Sometimes it was, we talked them into like a longer term injectable, which is a great treatment and keeps them well longer. And sometimes we won and sometimes we didn't. But I had to really change, in my view, what was a win. Because,
Mm.
we like each other probably because we have some of the same perfectionist qualities,
Right.
um, to something that was attainable. And frankly, sometimes that was, I had to tell myself, this is one of the only place this person in particular feels like anybody cares for them.
Mm.
And so if
Wow.
they
Yeah.
have to come back to get that check in, then I need to be the same nice person that they saw last time.
Hmm.
And I need to be the same nice person like 40 times from now. And because that's on me.
Yeah.
And so I would say to you, it really becomes what what is your standard for being successful. And
Yeah.
I would say to most artistic people is your standard is having the courage to put it out there.
There's no better, like, what am I trying to say here, of feeling or this like indesirable thing that I have in my life than like being a creative person. Like I know that that will never be fully just like checked, like you're good with it. I will live with this to the day I die. But it's truly like it's the one thing that like I'm very happy that I have is like it's like my North Star. It's like the one thing I've always, since I was a kid, I was like, oh, I gravitate towards this. Like it was, I want to either be an illustrator, or at one point it was like I want to be a musician or this and that. Like maybe the path is curved a little bit, but it's always been of like a creative path. And like I enjoy the way that it makes me think and approach like different situations in life and all that. So to your thing of just getting up and doing it as like that's the check sort of thing, like I would agree with that. But there's still, I mean, there's I grew up, well, I shouldn't say grew up, but I had two parents that were both artists, and I know in their own kind of areas that I think there's some underlying, like they wish they could have done more with that, of like just feeling like it was never enough sort of thing. And even 10 years ago, like Nick at 28 looking at Nick at 38, like yeah, I'd be like, well, that's awesome, I'm gonna be there, like, and but I know that it's just something that comes along with this personality and this kind of mindset that I don't know if I'll ever fully be like okay with it. And that's what sometimes it's, like I said, it's a little bit tough to like grapple with of, yeah.
Do you think that anybody's fully okay with the things they do? I mean, do you
Fuck
think,
no.
right?
No.
I mean, so you're trying to attain in your brain,
Right.
attain something that, I mean, I know you're special, but that no
Hmm.
one has.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And again, it is continuing to look at, so every person has, so if you look at anything with cognitive behavioral therapy, your thoughts define your behavior, blah, blah, blah. And there's things called schemas. So we all have sort of underlying schemas that sort of define some of the ways we look at life.
Okay.
And so for you, it's becoming aware of your schema and how that continually sort of pushes you back into something that, you know, yes, this is not comfortable for me. Because I don't like, putting myself out there. I don't like being a broadcaster of, ooh, look how great Nick is, even
Right.
though I'm comfortable with, and I have confidence in what I have to offer.
Yeah.
Um, and so looking at that and saying, how can we shape that a little bit differently? Again, so it doesn't cause so many rubs for you.
Hmm. How do you do that then?
You work at it. So every time you hear yourself saying, I don't, like I'm getting anxious thinking that I have to say this, you say,
Uh-huh.
you have an answer back. And I mean, that answer back probably should be generated by you, but like, I'll give
Right.
you a quick one of just, me saying to myself, no, Nick, this is just a hoop. I need to stop worrying about it. This is a hoop of putting my art out there.
Right.
So I'm not going to give it a lot of anxiety. I'm just going to jump through the hoop. I'm going to push the send button,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
say F it and
Yeah.
go off and do something else for a while and not distract myself from all the feelings I have about it, because
Uh-huh.
those are feelings that I already know from my years of having done this
Mm-hmm.
are wasted.
Yeah.
It doesn't change the outcome.
No, I mean it
You
doesn't
already
change.
said
Yeah.
you're okay with the outcome. Honestly, you've said, I mean, I'm okay. Well, you're not okay with being ignored, but you're okay with critiques. You're okay with, if you get 100,000 views. So, I mean, can you be okay with that, or do you need to have 200,000 views? I mean,
It's not even the numbers for me. I think and I'm in that weird age range too of where there was a transition because like my freshman year of college is when like Facebook came out, right? So
mhm,
with social media and tech, like now it's not so much an art piece, it's a piece of content. And like
mhm.
that that for me still, like, the content side is, again, I can rationalize that, like, you have to do this. Like, this interview right here is
Mhm.
a piece of content. Like, I know that's what it is, right? But there's still an ickiness for me of being like, oh, I'm just maybe making content as opposed to like fully putting myself into like artwork. And artwork, I still have this like weird connection in my head. Like, that's the legacy piece. Like, that's the piece of, of like that would potentially live on like past my days, sort of thing. And honestly, I'm saying this right now, and I don't even really fucking care about anything living on. It's more of just making an impact while I'm here. Like, my thing has always been, like, again, you commented about this earlier of, like, people that you don't really you don't jive with, like, why would you care how they feel about you? And I agree with that. But the people that I do look up to and respect, and especially a lot of these are creative people. It's like the now is where I want my work to be like kind of revered, and like people are like those people are like, yes, like, we accept him, he's awesome, like, this is it. That's for me where like the whole thing of like, well, I'm just making content right now, and like most of the people I look up to are like fine art people, and they're doing their thing. And so that's where I'm just like, fuck me, dude. Like, this is, you know.
Well, again, but my guess is there's a part of you because you have spent your life pushing yourself,
Sure.
and you have to be very careful that you're not like the greyhounds chasing the rabbit that you're never going to catch.
I mean, but isn't just knowing that that is what I'm doing like winning half the battle?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so now so here's what I would say about content. And
Yep.
this is as a non-creative, I mean, I think that being a psychiatrist is probably a creative experience, but
Absolutely.
I do not create any art. I have no
Absolutely.
drawing, any of that ability.
No. 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 Yeah.
Um, I would say this, that people are looking for authentic content.
Mm-hmm.
And And one of the best gifts that you have is when you do let people know you, it's, hey, here I am.
Yeah.
This is Nick.
Yeah.
Um, and so this type of content also is letting people see you.
Yes.
And and some of it is, the parts that you find hard, some of it is the parts that are funny as crap, but there is beauty to that vulnerability
Mm-hmm.
that I think can be as precious to people as artwork.
I would agree. I mean, I'm very much an open book on a lot of that, and a lot of that's too just because like I've been in therapy. I'm a big proponent of therapy.
Hmm.
I mean, again, my family and lifestyle. A lot of there's a lot of things with growing up of where like I take it very seriously, but I also don't take it very seriously. And so in that, I go, what's the harm or shame of just being open to people? Like, if somebody has a question about maybe what they perceive as like an insecurity on my part, like, why would I not just be honest about it? Like, I have no reason not to be here to talk to them. Maybe they're looking for their own, like, they have their own questions for their own problems that relate to this. So I'm very open in that way for sure with it. Yeah. And I would agree. I think that that is a valuable thing for people. I'm just,
It's
like I said,
it's also a gift of yours that you've maybe learned because of experiences, but I don't know that you understand that there's a lot of people that are not in that plane. They
uh,
they can't, again,
yeah.
they can let it out through art, they can let
Hmm.
it out through other means, but they
Right.
can't always find the words for it. And so sometimes we're giving words to people who can't find the words.
Yeah. I got a lot of them in my family, quite a bit.
Mm,
I mean, it's true. And I appreciate, I mean, it's very kind of you to say. Yeah, I don't know. I understand this internal like back
mhm,
and forth that I have. I get the fact that as a creative person, I'm always going to have some form of insecurity on,
mhm.
am I as good as I should be? I can be better. How is this resonating with people? The people that I want it to resonate with. I
Right.
get that. But I know I don't think it's going to go anywhere. But to your point, I think that there's just like different ways of framing that for myself when those
Hmm.
feelings start to bubble up. Dude, the funny thing about this, which this is just, I believe in energy in the universe. I was watching. Do you ever watch Sister Wives, the TV show?
I try not to because that feels
Dude,
way too much like work.
dude, it's so good. I love that bullshit on TLC. But they just were like talking with one of the sister wives sort of thing, and she was like, "Oh, I kind of like beat myself up sort of thing," and then I was like, learned that I need to like reframe these of like, it wasn't like a positive affirmation, but just like how do you reframe the negativity in a way of where you can look at it in like a positive light.
Hmm.
So it was just as soon as you started to talk about that, I was like, oh, sister wives. Okay, here we
Yeah.
go.
I mean, maybe Sister Wives took some cues from me or from cognitive behavioral
I
therapy.
don't know, dude. That family is
Probably,
bonkers.
it's
It
probably
probably is you. It probably is you. I
probably
think you need
owe
to.
me like royalties or something,
I
right?
would get some of that cheddar. Yeah, you got to go secure
Yeah.
the bag. So yeah,
Whew.
yeah. All right. The one of the last things why I have you, I want to kind of talk to you a little bit about because it is probably the other thing that I have to deal with and kind of come over the hurdles. It's creative block, and
Mhm.
that I get hit with it all the time, and a lot of it of why I want to speak to you about it because it kind of resonates with us talking about social media, and so that with social media and again of posting and how you kind of are able. I always refer to it as just like beating the algorithm. A lot of people refer to it as that, but it's the cadence. Posting a lot gets your stuff in front of people, on a regular
Mhm.
basis. So by needing to post a lot, you're obviously as an artist, if that's what you're posting, you got to be coming up with stuff all the time. And when that's not clicking for me, and like
Mhm.
I'm in a stretch right now where it's just not clicking. The stuff that I'm making, or I have an idea in my head, or like I can technically execute at a very high level, but I get it out and I'm like, this doesn't. Nope. It's like delete, delete.
Mhm.
How how can I go about dealing with some of that stress?
Okay, so you're how many years into being a creative?
I don't know. You want to say? I mean, like 7, 8 year old? Are we talking
I'm
like?
gonna say, like, so again, think about in your life when things have gotten where you couldn't. I mean, because a lot of times creatives, that's also their coping strategy, right? So life
Which is what?
sucks.
Oh, right,
Life
right.
sucks. I'm going to create something else.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, again, it's in some ways it's a gift because you have a built-in coping strategy, you,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but when that becomes something that you can't use for whatever reason,
Mm-hmm.
um, what can you do to sort of free your brain up?
I try to go be like super present with my kid.
Hmm.
I always refer to it as like be where my feet are, like just be hyper focused in this moment. I still, again, my brain is always running in a
Yeah,
million
always
miles.
has that other part.
It
Hmm.
always is. It never turns off. And Lex is amazing for putting up with me sometimes on that because I tell her I'm listening. I'm a very good listener, but I also still have this in the back of my head. And same, yeah. But like being with Joe, I mean, she's almost 2. So being the father of like a 2 year old, I mean, it as a parent, it's like at that age, especially too, like you have to be hyper present with them or like
Hmm.
she's gonna go like, I don't know, fall off the couch and like bust her head open or something like that. So it's just like that level of engagement is always really good for me.
Okay.
Um, Either than that, I don't know. Like that's my big thing. I mean, I love spending time with my wife, but we both have our own schedules and we're super busy, and then we're parents, so that's hard to kind of like notch that off.
Right.
But I don't have it's here. I literally I get so disciplined about it that I go, all right, I'm gonna shake this off, and maybe I'll go outside and have a cigar or something like that, or I don't know, do maybe a walk. I don't know. But I'm like right back in here, and I'm like, all right, go again, locked and loaded. Like you're gonna just boom, 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 and yeah, not the healthiest, but
Well, and again, I think so. You use distraction techniques, whether that's exercise or smoking a cigar. I can't tell you that's
mhm,
good, but whatever.
it's
You
delicious.
know, or your kid.
Yeah.
But I would say some of it too is a mindset, and so like the example you just gave, I would say, can you come back after playing with Joe and can you say, hey, I'm just going to take a break from what I think I need to do, and
Mhm.
I'm going to try to create something I think she would like.
I do that all the time right now. That's been a thing. That's become. It's funny because I know you don't look at any of my,
I
my
don't,
stuff.
because that would
Yeah,
require me looking lots of places, and I don't have time.
I don't blame you. I'm not even asking anybody to
You
by
might
any
have
means,
to, you
but
might have to teach me, but
I don't know.
yeah.
Uh, but that is what I would do. Is I will start to I'll see a toy of hers, or all to your point of think of something that she might like or whatever, or that I would want to make her or something like that. And that has been a means of like getting into a project just to do something and get it
Mhm,
from start to completion. It helps. I mean, don't get me wrong, it helps. The weird thing for me is then I actually have other people that when I say post it online, they resonate with that. And
mhm.
I'm like, that's great. But then I still have this internal conflict. I'm like, that's not the piece that I need to get out though. And so then then again, it comes back to this like battle of it's like, all right, you need to go back and you need to figure this out for yourself and da da da. And so, yeah.
So over time, and this is really a question, have don't you feel like that there's times where you the time had to just wait, you had to sort of wait through it or wade through it or whatever, trudge through it, be dragged through it, whatever.
Yeah.
But when the time was right, then it came and you had this feeling.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a big proponent of like the journey is greater than the destination sort of thing. Like I've
Mhm,
always, I think because I jump around so much too from like creative outlets, that's part of it. Like I love learning something new or
mhm.
of like rediscovering like a new idea for a piece of artwork or a project or something like that. It's always then once it's done, I'm kind of like, okay, what's next? So yeah, I know that I can put time into it, but again, I know that these are irrational thoughts. But I'm like, well, I'm 38, 40 is right around the corner, so like I better get my ass in gear and figure this out, which I know is ridiculous, but
Well, again,
that's
it's
you know,
also, well, there's an assumption there that there's something to figure out. And two, you remember when I talked about schemas earlier? I mean,
hmm
it's your schema of the dog's chasing the rabbit that you
yeah,
have to always be chasing.
yeah,
And and yes, to a certain extent to be successful, there is some of that. So
yes,
I'm not sugarcoating any of that.
right,
The people who are successful internally are also able to say, at what price? So,
mm,
what are my priorities?
right,
And then when I look at my priorities, where can I put that energy, that any of the things that I want to do, and it all still fit and be lined up?
yeah,
Sometimes that means letting the rabbit go for a little while.
yeah.
I mean, I feel like I let the rabbit go when my kids were small because
hmm
I wanted to be their mom.
I mean, there's
And you
nothing
know,
that's more important for me than being there for my daughter. Absolutely. Like that trumps. Yeah.
and I mean, a lot of people can do both and be very successful, but I found myself to be super miserable
Right.
when I was working all the time and trying to, make it to their games and all the things so that
hmm
there was no space to feel like that I could find that I could land and feel like I was doing what I needed to do for my kids, which is
hmm
sort of one of the reasons I changed jobs was just
Right.
I've got to find some more time. Um, but it really does sometimes you have to say for this season, and a season can be a month, it can be a year, it can be lots of years, but for
Sure.
this season, this is sort of what I have to do, even if it's not exactly the right fit. Um, it is what is best to keep my priorities and keep me reaching towards the things I want to do.
Yeah. I think I have a little bit of I mean you're right on it. And I feel like like I can't fully disclose, but I'm in a season of my own right now, like trying to figure some of this stuff out, right?
Right.
I think the weird thing for me though is also too like I have this sounds egotistical, which I don't mean it to, but like I've also been like patted on the back from, since I can remember in my teens, of like being that guy that put the work in and was, like super grounded and just a hustler. So it's a cloak that I wear, sort of thing, of like, oh yeah, this is for the people in my life, this is how they know me as. So that's a weird thing to be like, oh, I can pivot and put that down, because then it feels like it's, I don't know, you're letting go of a version of yourself, right? Whether if it's the version you're fine with, but it's what people see you as, and so then you've internalized that as part of you.
Right. But I mean, as we age, we all let go of versions of ourselves. I mean, even
For
though
sure.
I still feel 18 inside, I can tell you this body doesn't do what it used to do at 18.
Sure.
Um, and again, some of that, I'm the go-getter, I'm the fixer, I'm sort of the steady one,
Hmm.
also becomes the walls that keep other people out.
Yeah,
So
I
you
think I'm.
talk about the
Yeah,
cloak, but
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
super, again, uh,
I build some big walls too.
I've met you. Yeah, I know. Um, but 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 again, some of the coping strategies we develop as kids for whatever reason, our
Right.
family of origin, something that happens to us, whatever,
Yeah.
some of those coping strategies as we get older, they were great when we were kids because they kept us safe.
Yep.
Um, but as we get older, they keep us safe in a way that's not good for us anymore.
I a million percent agree with that. Yeah.
And so you have to say, okay, am I going to hold on to this because it's what I'm comfortable with? Or am I going to say, I'm going to hold on to parts of it? Because there's places in which that wall is a very healthy thing.
Hmm.
But are there places I can let that down a little bit so that I cannot have that need to chase the bunny quite so much?
I mean, but yeah, potentially. But I don't even know necessarily if it's like, it's not. I don't put those up as external walls towards family or friends. It's more like I have a hard time of, and again, talking about, D. For anybody listening to this, my stepdad. But when he got sick with cancer, and it was 6 months of hell. But he, even in that stretch, he was still like wearing that cloak. He was still that guy. And I've always had kind of said, and you knew him really well. There was far and few things that you could ever point to and be like, oh, that was like, maybe I would like shift from, how I would want to live my life, sort of thing. But the one thing I think for him sometimes was like over carrying that burden that was then a detriment to maybe some of the things that he wanted to do in his life.
Mhm.
Um, so you're right. I 100% see that, but it's also like, again, of being touted as that, and then of one of two people in my life that I really look up to and respect, like, of also still carrying that sort of thing, to his deathbed. Like, it's a weird thing of being like, I'm gonna, like, yeah, I'm gonna maybe like take a little bit of time off on this and calm down and find other ways, because it's just different. It's different from what my approach has been for
Right.
38 years.
But again, you're seeing it sort of in an all or none. So I either have the cloak on or I
Yeah,
don't.
absolutely.
And, and and there's probably some room somewhere in between there.
I'm sure there is. I just can't
Yeah.
figure it out. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, 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 no. Well, and I think that's the hardest thing of life
Right.
is where do you find the gray in that? So
Yeah.
it's not black or white. It's not cloak on, cloak off.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
somewhere in the middle because some of that is ingrained in you, Nick. It's part of your personality, and
Right.
it's actually a beautiful gift.
Yeah.
And it's a gift until it's not. So
Sure.
when it's taken to the extreme. And so I know this is a shocker to you, but extremes are something that you're very familiar with.
I don't. I think you're totally wrong on that, but whatever.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Whatever. And, and so it's really trying to find, you know, that you can still be that person for some people.
Yeah.
Um, but maybe not all the people you are. And maybe in some of the ways you also let some people join you in carrying that. Because one of the things that I know about Dee was there's a lot of loneliness in carrying the load all the time.
Oh, absolutely. Has to be. Has to be.
And, you know, so maybe that's something to look at. Again, I don't want you to become irresponsible, Nick, or I'm check it out for 2 months or anything like that. But maybe
Could happen.
letting a little bit of that, just I don't have to carry that today.
Yeah. And so what this in turn then opens me up to go full circle, that like creative block then falls to the wayside a little bit, starts to open up
I
my
mean,
brain.
I think that to me, creative block happens to some people when when they have too much of everything else.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's different for different people. I mean, I know a fair number of artists, who like have bipolar, who don't want to take medicine because it
Right.
kills their creativity.
Right.
They're like, pain brings on my creativity. And I'm just like, yeah, but it's really doing nothing for your life, you know?
What if, I'm just curious for somebody like that, what if they're like, but to me, this is the reason for my life. It is to create. So if I can't do that, then like, there's no point for me to be here.
So we try to find something in between.
Okay. We go back to that. Okay. That's interesting. But
And
that,
particularly for them, they need medication. I mean,
right.
bipolar 1 people, you lose brain cells every time you get manic.
Mm,
So that is bad because
I
there
didn't
will come
realize
a
that.
time, yes, there will come a time where it's a progressive disease. It is
Yeah.
not good to not treat. But sometimes we treat, sometimes you have to find the happy medium.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair, and I would, again, not to like poo poo on myself with that stuff. I think I'm self aware enough to know that like there's, again, like being a parent for me has completely shifted a lot of that
Mhm.
anxiety and stress, and it gives me a new, I don't know, purpose. Again, I hate using these
Yeah.
terms sometimes, but it does. It's giving me like a new purpose of like, well, this is what I should be doing. Like this is, I get so much enjoyment out of that. But I still, at the end of the day, it's like I was like, my mind gets set on this notion of like, well, you were put here to be an artist, and if you're not being an artist, then like, what the hell are you doing? And so there's still a little bit of like that I have to kind of like, calm the voices, I guess,
Mhm. Well,
Yeah.
and again, I think that's for all of us, that we feel like, we find whatever our purpose is in life.
Yeah.
And there's times that that purpose is really easy and we're like, yes, I am really, I'm getting
Yeah.
an A plus in being who I am.
I'm so
But
envious of those folks.
yeah, but most of us live in the C range,
Yeah.
where we're like, I'm going along. This is not perfect, but this counteracts and again, and I'm waiting for the time that whatever it is that's fumbling around in there, sort of reveals itself, because it will.
What's the better lane in your opinion to be in, to be somebody that you feel like your purpose, but you also feel super restricted that you are not able to be that version or do that thing, versus somebody that's like has not figured it out. They're still searching for it.
I think there's pluses and minuses to both. I think
Mm-hmm.
feeling no purpose leaves people feeling pretty empty and very
Mm-hmm.
susceptible to a lot of things in this world. And they go a lot of places that honestly they probably wouldn't have gone if they felt like they had purpose.
Yeah.
Um, and I think knowing your purpose um, allows you to balance. So I believe my purpose was to be a psychiatrist. I
Right.
don't know how I found this path, but I believe that this is the right place for me.
Yeah.
Um, do I like being a psychiatrist every day? No, I do not.
Sure.
But that I still have to go to work,
Yeah. Right.
Um, and as I've aged, I also, there's cumulative things. I've heard people's stuff for a very long time that I realize it also changes things in my life because of things I've heard.
Mm.
And, that cost sometimes makes me say, is this all worth it? And at the end of the day, I always come back around to, yes, it's worth it because, I get to walk with people in some pretty bad times, but also some pretty good times.
Yeah.
Um, and it's who I think I was created to be. And so I think knowing that, probably gives me a better foundation. So knowing you were created to be a creative person,
Hmm.
a lot of creates in there, gives you a foundation at least to know where to start.
Yeah,
And now we're just looking for balance. If you have no foundation, I mean, those folks struggle.
I would probably agree with that. Yeah, for sure.
And so again, now you're just looking at, you know, shaving off the corners, making it fit. And again, when you got a young kid, those corners look differently than as she gets older.
Yeah, that's true.
And, all the things that go with that. And so some of it is really just saying, I'm going to try to stay right here in my journey.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, that's beautifully put. Well, hey, we've been doing this for like an hour. I think we just
Yeah.
clocked in a good one on it. The
Okay.
last thing I was going to ask you, just again, your own opinion on this, but um, for other artists, for other creatives out there, like you and I kind of talked about this before our call, and I had mentioned that I think therapy and mental health is something that falls at the wayside a lot of times for
Mhm.
creatives. What bit would you kind of give to someone that maybe is dealing with some of these thoughts of stress and anxiety, imposter syndrome, creative block, things that we talked about? Like, how would you encourage them to kind of look for help, look for other means to kind of just to help grapple and deal with these things, better understand them?
Well, I think that, I mean, I'm a psychiatrist, so I believe in the power of therapy. There's all kinds of different therapists, but I talk about this is probably tacky, but I talk about mental health care with my patients, such as like shoe shopping. Sometimes you have to try on a couple pairs before you find the right fit. If you go to a mental health person and you're like, okay, one, this person's crazier than me, or two, like, I just don't like them because there's some personality that just don't mix. Um, you don't have to go back. You don't have to try to make that work. You've got to find somebody that you feel like you can talk to.
Hmm.
If in the first session you're like, okay, I felt like that went well, if you get 10 sessions in and you're like, I don't like this person suddenly, you need to go back to therapy and talk to that person because it probably means they've pushed a button in you versus
Yeah,
they've suddenly changed into somebody else.
interesting.
Um, and part of what therapy is really uh, looking at relationships.
Yeah.
So, and how to navigate healthy relationships. And
Hmm.
and some of that you practice with your therapist.
For the times that I've been in therapy, that I always love for the fact of I would think I'm coming in to talk about one thing, and they would always kind of get me over on this other topic that was like the underlining problem for what it was that
I
I
mean,
thought it
that is
was.
what we're supposed to be doing. I
I
mean,
mean, well, yeah, I've had success for that.
there's
So,
some basics we were going to cover today, and we really just meandered around where we wanted to meander.
which is great. I think that's why we kind of wanted to set this up like a session for
Yeah.
exactly this. So, well, buddy, I think we did it. So,
Okay. Awesome. And
thank you
again,
so much for doing this.
no problem. You let me
Yeah.
know if you want to do again or what you want me to do, or if you need
No,
something.
this was great. I think this is exactly what I wanted out of it. So this was
Okay.
killer.
So
But
look at you doing content today.
what's that?
Look at you doing artist content today.
I know, man. Now I got to go be a dad for a little bit and
Okay.
potentially do work later. So